Welcome to Common Ground. We're on a roll here. Today's episode is going to be about beer, which is great because it's
sun's shining.
Getting
perfect weather for a beer.
Yeah, it's always perfect weather.
Dangerous day to be a beer, even.
It's dangerous day. It's just making me better talking about it. So we're going to go through some of the talking points. I think it's a popular topic, especially on a hot summer day. How about we start with just a little overview of beer and some background for anyone who maybe hasn't come across a pub.
Listen, if you're not Australian or New Zealand, or you're not a big beer drinker, I mean, beer is one of the most popular beverages in the world, right?
Mm.
Like, I think I looked up on average worldwide, and there's a lot of countries where they don't drink beer, but still on average, it's like 25 liters of beer per person, which is a fair amount per year, right? At its core, beer is pretty simple. It's got four main ingredients: water, yeast, malted barley, and hops.
Yeah.
In fact, in Germany, they even have a law, like the purity law, which means that you can only use those four ingredients.
Yeah.
There's almost an infinite number of combinations of the type of hops, the production methods, the fermentation methods that have a huge impact on the taste, the aroma, the texture, basically what the final product looks like.
Yeah. So obviously, because there's so many variants, you're going to get a lot of different options. So
there are a lot of different options, but actually you can break down beer into two primary categories.
Okay.
Ales and lagers.
Okay.
And the difference between the two is the fermentation temperature and the type of yeast that's used. So ales are fermented warm and have like a fruitier, more complex taste.
Okay.
While lagers are fermented cold and are usually crisper and cleaner.
Okay.
And you can kind of think of like lagers as like a lot of like big mass-produced beers, like Heineken, for instance. And most ales tend to be more like small batch produced craft beers, for instance.
And I think that's interesting, right? So you've got these small breweries that start up that kind of have their own recipes to how they want, beers that, they change up the ingredients you mentioned. I think the first thing we want to talk about today is craft beer. Like, what is that? How did that kind of come about and why it's so important?
Totally. So I think like even when I was a teenager, like craft beer wasn't really a thing. You drank like Corona, you drank Heineken, you drank like big mass-produced lagers. But in the last 20 years, craft beer has gone from being a hobby that some people have to like a global movement. There's probably hundreds of thousands of small breweries using local ingredients, making beer in small batches, having unique and like really interesting flavor profiles, and really like pushing the boundaries of the styles of beer.
Yeah.
And in craft beer, there's probably a few different popular styles. So there's IPAs, which you may have heard of, stouts and sours. And IPAs are also, and this is something that confused me a lot when I was getting into craft beer, because there's so many variations of IPA. There's like session IPA, NEPA, DEPA, West Coast IPA, and they're all essentially the same style, which is a very hop-forward beer, but they vary in the amount and the type of hops that are used.
And so with all these different varieties, obviously it's a massive industry. But people aren't drinking beer as much, is that right?
Yes. So even though I said 25 liters per person, that's actually going down, right? Like that trend globally, even though craft beer is exploding, the total amount of beer that's being drunk around the world is actually going down pretty significantly. Firstly, people are drinking either more like spirits or cocktails or wine even. I know we covered wine in a different episode, or a lot of non-alcoholic beverages, right? And there's a few different reasons for that, both health reasons. I think people are a lot more health conscious, as well as cultures that aren't big on beer. People that don't drink beer for religious reasons, for instance, are growing as well. So obviously that's affecting the amount of beer that's sold. Non-alcoholic beer is growing very quickly. The sales are rising exponentially. And breweries are really investing in developing those non-alcoholic beers now as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. For a while, I actually was off the alcohol. And yeah, non-alcoholics have just seen an absolute boom. I also think, though, that a lot of people are using it, not only non-alcoholics, but also low-strength or mid-strength beers.
Absolutely.
You see that a lot with a lot of people in terms of just trying to reduce the amount of consumption. Mm-hmm. Rest, I think it was always big on go for the most amount you can and the highest strength.
Yeah, listen, that's not healthy, and we shouldn't encourage it. But you're absolutely right. Like the culture, I think, around drinking, consuming alcohol is changing a lot. And the beer industry needs to adapt to accommodate for this.
Yeah, and speaking of how they're adapting, so there's a lot of different trends that are happening in multiple industries, and in beer industry, sustainability of how they make the beer, and also I guess how they're thinking about how they craft it, how they mass produce it. That's going under the lens at the moment.
Like many other mass production industries, producing beer is very water intensive, very energy intensive. There's a lot of wastage, etc. And people overall are a lot more conscious of this, And beer typically is sold in single-use packaging. So many breweries are trying to recycle water, for instance. They're using solar power maybe for heating their brewing equipment, trying to source local ingredients. That's another thing. Sometimes people are importing hops from the complete other end of the world to make their beers, which is also not great. And things like reducing the amount of packaging that beer comes in, You probably see now more beer being sold in plastic wrappers rather than in big cardboard boxes and stuff like that. And even some companies are using the grain, the stuff that's left over from the beer brewing process, to make things like bread or dog treats or biofuels as well.
Yeah, I think that's really great, right? But I also think it's inevitable. The market's growing. There's so much products that are out there, but there's going to be a lot more mass production. So how do you maintain it? That's really good, giving us a really good overview of beer. It's made me, pretty thirsty for it, if I'm honest.
Right.
We always like to give people a bit of a talking point in terms of a question to ask, just to open up, a discussion. So what are we going to leave people with?
Listen, I think if you're in a group of beer drinkers and you wanted to sort of incite a bit of discussion, I would definitely ask some questions around the rise of non-alcoholic or what they call smart beers. These are beers either that have no alcohol or they use some sort of other substance to give you a happy feeling, but that don't necessarily give you a hangover or some of the negative effects of alcohol. So some breweries are actually putting in way more investment and effort into these new categories of drinks because A, consumers want them, but B, they want one that still tastes good, right?
Yeah.
That still is a quality product that's enjoyable and hits all those refreshment notes that you want out of a beer, right?
Makes sense.
So I would ask about that, and if people think it's a trend or if that's something that's going to be here to stay.
It's a pretty exciting thing to look at beer companies, and they're going to be really popular. I know there's actually a few which are purely non-alcoholics beer companies, and they're doing so well. So I think it's a pretty interesting space. So it's always worth having a bit of a Google. So that's everything we wanted to go through today. I think we're overdue for a beer, but I think
Absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in. And as per usual, if they've got any potential ideas or anything you want us to cover, please send it through. And hopefully you've found some common ground with this chat about beer.